big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
Anyways, there's a lot of new moments, a lot of really cool moments. That there is our new intro done by our guy, Steven. Nick and I looked it over. We certainly love it as much as you guys do. What's up, guys? Welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. My name's Usayd Koshul. That's Nick Whalen. You can check out our interview with Jackson Slater, the last episode we did. Check us out on Twitter at Usayd Koshul, at _ Nick Whalen. Dude, I don't know about you, but Super Bowl's officially over. We got the list of combine invites today. The steam suddenly picking up about what the Bears could do at number 10. And I have to say, it is one of the more complicated conversations to have in recent memory, just because there's 7 or 8 different ways that this pick could go, depending on how the first 9 picks go.
Oh, 100%. And actually, we haven't talked about this ahead of time. So I'm excited because I don't know how you feel about certain prospects, but there's certainly a lot of different ways that they could go. So I'm going to start us off because I don't know how you feel about this. I have about 4 realistic defenders that the Bears could take at 10. Now, people are going to say Mason Graham. Mason Graham, in my opinion, will not be there. Not even close. Abdul Carter, not going to be there, y'all. Okay? Like, hoping that Mason Graham or Abdul Carter fall is about like the odds of us signing Drew Dahlman and Trey Smith, which is what I see on Bears Twitter all the time. Like, it's likely not going to happen. But here are my 4 guys. Okay, so I'm gonna throw them out there, and then I'll see if you like them, and then we'll talk about kind of their game a little bit. So one is a surprising guy that I like more than I thought is Jalen Walker, who is edge / linebacker type from Georgia. Similar, because he's a little bit smaller type size guy. Similar is Mike Green, okay, edge from Marshall. And then James Pierce, similar from Tennessee. And then you have the big guy, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. And so those are my 4 guys I would consider at 10. Are you in on any of those guys?
Yes, absolutely. And again, here's why. Because the first thing to note is that some of the SEC guys, like not Shamar Stewart, but Jalen Walker from Georgia, as well as James Pierce Jr., those are players that have consistently sort of been at the very top of everyone's list, right? Like going into the preseason projections, talking to some guys that cover the Nittany Lions for 247 Sports, one of them straight up said, hey, it's a very big prove it year for Abdul Carter, because a lot of people saw Abdul Carter as being Micah Parsons 2.0. And evidently he has kind of proven himself to be that type of player this year. But again, like James Pierce and Jalen Walker, guys that were kind of really sort of at the top of everyone's list in terms of number 1 prospect to watch. And then you look at Shamar Stewart from A&M. You know, Shamar Stewart as well as Mike Green, these are 2 names that have flown under the radar here, specifically because at A&M, there's another first-round edge rusher in Nick Scorton, who really from start to finish in college, I think he was at the University of Purdue for a couple of years, where he was the Big Ten's leader in sacks, and then made the jump over this past year to A&M. And so Shamar Stewart was pretty much playing second fiddle all year, but if you turn on the tape, he had a really good year, and he is, to me, the classic sort of Ryan Poles prospect, in the sense of he's not going to be a guy that, you know, comes in day one and is going to blow anyone away. But like, he's 6'6", right? So he fits that billing in terms of what Dennis Allen wants in his edge rushers, 290 pounds. He's got the length and the strength to really be that versatile weapon that guys like Ryan Poles and Dennis Allen are going to covet.
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of, you know, Cam Jordan-ish type of guy. Reminds me of a little of like Rashawn Gary. Like, you're betting on traits. And the thing with Stewart, y'all, is I mean, for his size, solid bend, strong, athletic, effort. He's an effort player, right? You want those guys to flow into, you know, cutback lanes or to swarm, you know, to the ball for tackles. but he's never had more than 1.5 sacks in any season. So right there, that scares me at 10 because you want a guy that can, we know how it is. The NFL is about the pass. And if you're a run stopper, you're not going to go high in the draft. You have to be able to sack the quarterback. Now, he had 39 pressures last year, which is really good. So you got pressures, couldn't sack the guy. I'd rather be able to get the quarterback to the ground. So then you pivot to Mike Green. Mike Green led the FBS in sacks. Dude, he's physical. He gives me a little Khalil Mack vibes, where it's not just pure, athleticism in the outside. And all three of these guys, y'all, are similar in size. So Stewart's the big guy, right? Which is who you talked about. So Jalen Walker, 6'2", 245, and played some linebacker and edge. Mike Green, 6'3", 251. So again, they're very close in size. And then you got James Pierce Jr., who's bigger, 6'4", 6'5". We'll see how he is at the combine, 245. So he's a little lighter and a little rangier. But they're all going to be like that. I mean, people have rumored this, like the Micah Parsons type trade. Micah Parsons is like that size, y'all. He's like 6'3", probably 255, 260. So like all three of these guys are going to be like the athletic guy on the opposite side of Sweat. And to me, that's what I would prefer for this defensive line.
And see, that to me brings up a really good point here, because we know for a fact that when it comes to the players the Bears want to covet, I mean, the RAS scores for these guys have to basically be through the roof. Like, to me, I've established his own rule of thumb when it comes to Ryan Poles and the ways that he drafts, in terms of the fact that if a guy doesn't have an RAS score of like 8.5 and above out of like a scale of 10, I mean, that guy's probably, and that guy's not in the green zone, that guy probably is not going to go ahead and probably will not end up being high on the Bears list. Now, Mike Green makes a lot of sense because he was just down at the Senior Bowl.
Hold on one thing, man. So just for people that don't know, so RAS, it's relative athletic score. So it brings everything into account. If you don't follow that, it's an advanced analytics. So it takes size, height, and weight. Also takes and determine like a lot of different categories. So you have like your vertical type of jumps, your broad jump, your vertical, etc. But then also your quickness, 3-cone drill, short shuttle, but then also your speed. So 10-yard burst, 20-yard burst, 40-yard burst. So just I just want to let you, and they're all factored out of 10, and then it all comes into one score, which is your RAS score. So 10 out of 10 obviously is the best. And then a 1 or 0 is the worst. I do warn you though, y'all, like, Chase Claypool was really high in this number, et cetera. So, but anyways, just wanted to clarify so people don't know what RAS is.
Yeah, and so, those are really good points here, but the Bears, for some reason, right, they love their guys with their high RAS scores. And then number two, the thing with the Bears is that they love their Senior Bowl guys, right? Like, you're talking about a GM that pretty much took Darnell Wright as well as Tyreek Stevenson in the first 2 rounds when they were both down in Mobile. And I think Javon Dexter might have been a junior that year, but he was certainly on a lot of people's watch list as well, because the Senior Bowl is becoming this sort of growing event. And then, beyond the pass rushers, there's also the conversation of, well, you've got an offensive-minded head coach. Why not invest in some offense here with a Kelvin Banks or a Will Campbell or even an Ashton Genty? Now, I'm just going to go on the record and say this, that up until I want to say probably November, December, right, the Thanksgiving, Christmas time, we had a lot of rankings of it's going to be at the OTs, right? The offensive tackles, it's going to be Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell, everybody else. Now you're seeing more and more guys just crack into that rotation, which makes that conversation about number 10 more complicated.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Because, like, I'll throw in some of the other guys, which I think everyone has Will Campbell as the best offensive lineman. But, again, you also have how long are his arms? And I know some people don't care about that. The NFL cares about arm length. And so if you're not north of 32 inches for arm length, you're likely going to be moved inside. And so that's kind of the rumor with Will Campbell. That's also the rumor with Kelvin Banks, too. He might move into guard. And that's the rumor with a lot of these guys is you don't know if they're going to be a tackle or they're going to be a guard. So just for clarification, y'all, the reason why arm length matters is because as an offensive lineman, you're mainly catching defenders, right? And they always talk about edges having speed to power. And that's basically a starting a sprint into an offensive lineman where you can bull rush them back. So the longer the arms are, the more you can withstand and stop that defender. And when you have short arms, you're really vulnerable to more bull rushes. So other offensive tackles / guards, we'll see where they end up, man. Armand Mambu, he is Missouri. Big boy, 6'4", 332. He's rising on lists. He's in Dane Brugler, a guy I really respect. He's in his top 10 at The Athletic, if people want to look at that article. Maybe the top offensive tackle some people talk about is Josh Simmons, Ohio State, 6'5", 310. He got injured during the season. If he was not injured, he might be quite a bit higher. And I think that's it in terms of me of guys that could possibly be in the mix at 10 in terms of offensive line. Now, I don't know if we talked about this on the last podcast or not. Ashton Jeanty, okay? I'm against Ashton Jeanty, okay? Just in general, just like running backs early. I looked at his junior year film or his film in 2023 because this year was unbelievable, you know. Dude, he was so good last year. And like the things that he did, it was still the same stuff. Because I like more data, right? Like if you're great for a few games, okay, half a year, a whole year, right? Multiple years like that, then it's good. Then it's proven. Dude, he was so good last year. He's such a good receiver. I'm warming up to that idea. And for the reason of this, it's not a great draft class. And so if you can get a great prospect and not a great draft class, that might be better than getting a guy at a need position who might just be above average to good.
So the Ashton Jeanty convo is interesting because I do think he's a bit expendable in the sense of if you have the right offensive line and you have the right sort of system in place and your offensive line is playing together as a cohesive unit, you can make any running back look good. And again, if Ben Johnson's as good as we think he is in terms of being a head coach / play caller, he will certainly figure it out. But, you know, you brought up Armand Membu, who to me is one of the major risers. A little side note, a few weeks ago, before the Bears hired Dan Rouchar, they interviewed Justin Fry, who is now the offensive line coach with the Arizona Cardinals, but used to be with Ohio State. So that means the Josh Simmons of the world plus the Donovan Jacksons of the world should technically be high on the Bears list, which I going to make another quick side note. Ohio State's sending a hell of a lot of talent on offense this year to the draft, but it just to me does not seem as hyped up as it's been in years past. You know, it's the same with the defensive side of the ball, but we'll talk about that with our 247 Sports Ohio State guys. Okay, so for reference here, you mentioned the long arms, right? Like we don't have the measurements in for Armand Membu just yet, but he is 6'3", 332. Okay. Braxton Jones is 6'5", 310 and has about 35, almost 36-inch arms. You know, Darnell Wright is 6'5", 333 and has 33 and a quarter inch arms is what we're effectively looking at. And so you're talking about the fact that if Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks, their arms measure significantly shorter, I want to say you're at like a 29, 30, 31 type range. I mean, the Bears have to knock them down the board, right? But if a guy like an Armand Membu or Josh Carnley Jr. from Oregon measures to be significantly higher in terms of his arm length, because Josh Carnley is already 6'4", 315. Yep. Those guys to me right there should vault to the top of the Bears list and should squarely be in that conversation at number 10 overall.
The one question for you, man, is do you know how long Karan Amagaji's arms are?
I do not off the top of my head, no, which is probably kind of a disgrace anyway, considering his high school coach and I text back and forth like every single day. Just about general Bears talk, so.
Yeah. So Karan Amagaji's arm length is 36 and an eighth, y'all. So like the NFL wants it to be north of 32. Actually, they really want it north of 33. So is 36 and an eighth. So like a 3-inch advantage over Darnell Wright, which arm length isn't everything, but the NFL does like it. Just like they matter with arm length with defenders. They do care about that. So how long they can arm one arm or long arm them. So that is interesting what you're talking about. The one thing that I pause on with offensive tackle at 10 for Chicago is I'm holding out hope for Karan Amagaji. I'm holding out hope for Braxton Jones. I don't think it's a huge glaring need. And so it feels like these guys could potentially be a little bit of a reach at 10. And that's why I would kind of choose to defender. But you had mentioned Josh Connerly Jr., who, there was the Athletic article, Kevin Fishbane, I think, Adam Hogue, was it? Or Johns, I think. One of them had Josh Connerly Jr. in the second round. So if we look at maybe second round prospects, man, at 39, one of them had Josh Connerly Jr. going there. That's a different conversation, I think, because then it's like, okay, well, Braxton Jones is in the last year of his contract next year. If you essentially draft a guy, it's competition with Karan over who's going to be the next left tackle. If you don't bring Braxton Jones back, I'll be more open to that conversation then.
Okay, so here's my whole take on Karan. I guess Karan being the freakishly athletic guy that he was coming out of high school and going into college, because, I mean, if you watch Karan's senior year tape, he was a freaking monster. And I will say, for every head coach and defensive coordinator in the state of Illinois, a total sort of pain in the ass to handle. Okay, that's the first thing. You look at him going to kind of Yale and everything, and what's so interesting is that these guys that are sort of these freak athletes in terms of their potential, sometimes the reason that they don't go to these big D1 schools, first off, and like in Karan's case, I mean, he went to Yale, it's simply because coming out of high school, right, they may not be the biggest, fastest, or the strongest guys. They may also not be the most technically refined, but their athleticism, shows up. I mean, you go to any sort of camp right now, whether it's spring, summer, or fall, and the big thing to really understand is that you can gain an idea of a guy's athleticism based on the way that his feet move, especially as an offensive lineman. Like, I was talking to a strength and conditioning coach who once told me, he said, if your feet stop moving, well, then you essentially suck. Now, that to me could not be a more truer statement for offensive linemen, because you do have to go ahead and keep your feet moving. As some random news breaks here about the Giants, but we don't care about that team. Okay, so one of the big things to me in this draft, I think, is you look at that second round. That to me right there, with the amount of talent that the Bears have in terms of what's going to be available, right? You have 39 and 41. This is where I think Ryan Poles targets those guys like a Jack Sawyer or a Landon Jackson, or even a guy, if he's there, like a Gray Zabel, simply because Ryan Poles loves his guys in round 2 that can be instant contributors. And to me, a guy like Zabel or Landon Jackson would be instant contributors on this team.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, I mean, we talked about this off air, but like if Chicago traded down from 10 to get another second round pick, I would be very game for that, because there's a lot of these guys that I like. Like if you just think of, you're talking about D line, right? And like Landon Jackson is like a Shamar Stewart, DeMarcus Walker, like an oversized end, an undersized D tackle type. But then if you wanted to get like just a D tackle, like maybe Walter Nolan falls, Tyleek Williams falls, TJ Sanders. Like there's some really, really good D tackles in this class. Derek Harmon, I think, is rising on some boards, and some boards he's not there. If he was more consistent, he would be for sure first round pick. He might be still. There's a lot of good D tackles. Like there's still other D ends, like you were mentioning them. And then linemen. So you mentioned Donovan Jackson actually earlier. He would be in this area. Gray Zabel, y'all. I feel like I was like original Gray Zabel, like truther. Like I was pounding the table for him before it was like cool. And then he did what he did at the Senior Bowl. he's a perfect center prospect. He can get pushed back a little bit. He needs to work on his anchor, but he's such a good center prospect that he would, as you're talking about, be like instant starter at center. I know people are nervous about that. I'm not nervous with a rookie at center. But then also you have the offensive tackle from Minnesota, and I'm gonna not say his name correctly. Do you know his name? Like it's Arante Irsi, something like that.
Yeah, so it's going to be Arante Irse, who talking to someone that is connected to someone that's from the town that he's in, kind of a weird connection. I've heard really good things about, and I would not be surprised to see PJ Fleck kind of throw his hat in the ring with the Bears and basically be like, hey, I'm going to vouch for this guy. Because the Minnesota's online coach is so interesting simply because I've had a chance to have like incredibly brief conversations with him, when he was coming in to visit and stuff. And I asked him, I was like, well, hey, how's Irsay doing? And surprisingly, I got nothing but really good reviews. But see, Irsay to me is, before I let you kind of go here, this sort of Bears like prospect too, right? Because the guy's 6'6", 330. And
he's huge.
Like, he's freaking massive, number one. And then number two, like, he's played, I think, 37 or 38 games as a left tackle. And obviously, he's part of, like, the COVID class because he's still got a couple years of eligibility. But, like, his sophomore, junior, and then senior year, he pretty much went ahead and played every single game except one, so 38 starts. And by the way, with Minnesota and PJ Fleck, they love their 1-2 punch at running back. Jordan Newman's a running back there who is a local Chicago area kid, and let's just call it how it is. Ben Johnson also loves to run the ball and get his big giants out into space. So Irsay is another one that's flying under the board.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I keep going back to thinking that Ben Johnson wants bigger O-linemen. And yeah, when you go in the Athletic, he's listed bigger. He's actually listed 6'6", 339. And then you go the same way, 6'4", 339. You got Jonah Savanaia, if I'm saying that correctly, from Arizona. He's likely going to kick into guard. He's huge. Wyatt Millam from West Virginia is another interior guy I like a ton. Like, there's just so many guys that I like that I wish the Bears would trade down. But I think if you just look overall, there's a lot of good linemen. More I like in the second round than at 10, but there's possibilities there. There's good D tackles. There's good edge guys. Actually, I think at both 10 and at 39 and 41. It really makes you wonder, man, like, how should we attack, or how should the Bears attack free agency if you think between those three picks, you're going to get a D lineman and two offensive linemen, or two D linemen and one offensive lineman?
I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of wrestle with this. Like, I would have straight up said, hey, give me 3 offensive linemen all the way. Now, there's 2 things to keep in mind. So, number one, with the Bears, like, let's just call it how it is. I mean, as much as Bears fans on Twitter, right, have driven up this narrative that the Bears are going to land Drew Dalman and Trey Smith in free agency, like we were talking about. I mean, Drew Dalman's like 6'1", 315, 320, I think, So he may not have the length that the Bears covet necessarily in terms of what they're going to want out of center. That's the first thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind is, there's no guarantee that Trey Smith even hits free agency, right? So and again, that's a very complicated sort of conversation to have. And so now I think it begs the question of, well, what do the Bears do? Tevin Jenkins, as good as gone, as vocal I've been. Like, I love talking to Tevin in the locker room, but it's clear it's time to move on. I would say that you have to go with defense at number 10 overall, and then your next 2 picks, 10 or somewhere in the first round, go defense, depending on how far you trade down. And then from that point onward, you have to go offense. But then again, the caveat, I think, to me comes in here to where if you're the Bears, and let's just say you trade out of 10 and you trade into, let's just say that 14, 15, 16 range. You're getting an extra second and probably an extra fourth. That 14, 15, 16 range, still good enough to select a offensive or defensive lineman. So at that point, it gets based on how far the board falls. But let's just say you go from 10 to 22 and you pick up another first rounder in 2026. Well, then the conversation, I think, shifts to offensive line, defensive line.
Yeah, that's fair. That's definitely fair. And like piecing it together, like in my head, I mean, obviously they're going to hit a need in free agency, and I'm with you. Like, well, would it be great if the Bears signed Drew Dahlman and Trey Smith? Yes, 100%. Like, but again, like I don't think it's realistic, y'all. Like maybe one. I'm going to go with probably neither. That's what my gut tells me. And they're probably going to sign, Mekhi Becton and another veteran interior offensive lineman, and then they're going to draft probably 2. That's my preference. My preference is to sign 2 interior offensive linemen and then draft 2 interior offensive linemen. So that way you have depth, whether they keep Ryan Bates or not, doesn't matter to me. But also you can draft and develop. You look at these good teams, they draft guys, they don't have to play them right away, they develop, and then they put them in. Like that should be the cycle. And so like if you, let's say you went that route, you signed no one that's high end, then maybe your high end guy you draft or you sign is Milton Williams. He's in your D tackle rotation then. And then you go edge at 10 or 14 or 22 because there's a bunch of different edges. And then you still can go 2 linemen in the early second round like we're talking about. So kind of overall, y'all, what we're talking about is there's a lot of good options here. Like where the Bears have needs, there are guys that we like. And it's not like we're wishing and hoping into it because like wide receiver, y'all, I really only like one really good guy. There's a couple other guys that are okay later on, but it's not Roma Dunze for me, so like, or quarterback, right? This is not a good quarterback class. And we already got Caleb Williams. So like where the Bears have needs, there's some good options this year. So like, it's actually a really good match. I'm not going to go crazy down the road, man, but I'm going to mention this. I do like Will Johnson. I don't think the Bears should go corner at 10. He might fall there, even though he shouldn't fall there. He's a good prospect. So there's a lot of different ways that they could go. But if Nick Whalen was Ryan Poles' new right-hand man because Ian Cunningham left, I don't think he's leaving. I would say edge at 10, O-lineman twice in the second round, and then either a D tackle or a running back at 72.
And the meat of this running back class is really back half of round 2, round 3, and then round 4. You mentioned Luther Burden there, so I'm going to start a little fire here, but Ryan Poles loves his Chicago area prospects, right? His prospects from the state of Illinois. Luther Burden's from East St. Louis, people, which I get is like 5 to 6 hours from Chicago, but like, hey, who cares? It still sort of applies here. No, but I think the big thing to also keep in mind is that as we start to have this sort of conversation here, is that if it's a situation where, because like to me in recent memory, I mean the Bears have never traded down in the first round, right? With Ryan Pace, it was always let's trade up. With Ryan Poles, I mean you've really only had 3 first round picks in 3 drafts because he had 0 first rounders his first year here. I mean, but look, if it means basically going ahead and trading down in the first round to get that extra draft capital to really maximize the value of those picks in rounds 2, 3, and 4, I mean, I'm all for it. And if Ryan Poles wants to keep adding depth, because again, the Bears don't have that 4th rounder this year because of the Austin Booker trade. Like, go get that extra 4th rounder. Go get the extra 4th rounder because some team is going to want to trade up. Like if you're the Kansas City Chiefs right now, we can take a few extra minutes here. But if you are a team such as the Chiefs right now, like your offensive line is due for a rebuild. You were pretty much, let's call it how it is, one of the worst teams in the league this year, scoreboard wise alone, right? They should not have ever been 15-2 with how many 1-score games they had. But like if you're a team like Kansas City that wants to get aggressive to get one of these offensive linemen, because Andy Reid and Brett Veach will do it. I mean, I get trading down the 21 spots is going to be a hell of a lot, but from the Bears' perspective. But I do think it's something that you seriously entertain. And the reason being is because the Chiefs are going to give up a first-round pick because they know that first-rounder is pretty much going to be a second-rounder next year. And it gives the Bears more assets in a smaller range.
Yep. Yep, and I'm 100% with you with that in trading down because one, the more above average to solid to good players you have on your roster on rookie contracts, the bigger the window that you have to sustain a good team. Because Green Bay is running into this, man, within the next 2 years, because they traded Aaron Rodgers, they traded Devontae Adams, and they got extra draft picks. All those guys are their contracts are coming due, and so it's going to be tough for them to keep everyone on the same team. So as you're saying, trading down, getting an extra 2, getting an extra 1, getting an extra 3 or 4, whatever it might be, is another guy you put in here, and that might be your tight end that's backing up Cole Kmet. Like you're just going to start stacking depth. And when injuries happen, because they always happen, y'all, now they have a quality guy that can step in instead of Larry Borum, instead of, insert whatever, and the huge drop-off happens, D-tackle last year. And the Bears team crumbles. So, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I'm team trade down all the time.
Oh, and just a little bit of a side note here as well. I mean, look, we've got to be honest about something. Like, the Bears are, in terms of the players that are already on the roster, going into year four of the Ryan Poles era, the Bears are starting to get more expensive. There's a legit possibility next offseason that we're talking about a Darnell Wright extension. And then Kyler Gordon as well as Jaquan Brisker. I know people are going to be like, well, Jaquan's never healthy, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is it's like they are eligible for contract extensions. Braxton Jones is eligible for a contract extension. Next offseason, Roshan Johnson's going to be eligible for a contract extension as well. And then you're really going to have to start to make decisions about, well, Javon Dexter's going to be eligible for a contract extension after this year, as will, Braxton Jones, Brisker, and Gordon are eligible this year. And then you look at, hey, do we start to maybe think about extending guys like TJ Edwards as well, simply because he's been the best defender that the Bears have had? Tyreek Stevenson's going to be eligible for one. So trading down and getting those guys on 3-4 year contracts 4-year deals is not going to be a bad idea either. And I mean, let's call it how it is. Like, if we look at lessons learned from the Super Bowl, the Chiefs and Eagles both showed us that windows are not open just because you have a franchise quarterback. Like, windows are open based on how good your roster is. And at max, the window now is basically 3 to 4 years, regardless of whether that quarterback is on a rookie contract or not.
Mm-hmm. And my last closing thought is this. You mentioned TJ Edwards, okay? TJ Edwards, y'all, is the exact Chicago Bear that you want on this team. And I'm going to go to the last game that Chicago played against Green Bay, okay? You guys probably remember this play. Kevin Byard comes screaming off the edge on a blitz, hits Malik Willis, right? Fumbles the ball, okay? And there's a couple of guys that are going for the ball. TJ Edwards, again, is an NFL veteran. The Bears aren't going to the playoffs. Dives and sacrificing his body and recovers that fumble, okay? The second to last play of the game, with the field goal, right? Remember the field goal. The play before that was the DJ Moore reception, and then they clocked it. After he clocks it, if you look on the sideline, TJ Edwards is pumped up and excited on the sideline. That's a guy that wants to win, and he's invested for the team. It's not me contract. Like, you talk about like culture and leadership in the locker room, guys that do it on the field. TJ Edwards is a guy that I think if you reward with a contract extension, looks better for the whole team, because like, hey, that guy balls out all the time and he got paid. Now I should do the same thing. And then it's a domino effect.
And that is part of why I do think that he is the first Ryan Poles free agent signing to ultimately sign another 2 to 3 year deal this offseason, because the Bears can fit him on the books, plus go ahead and bring in guys like Trey Smith, Mekhi Becton, and Chase Young in free agency. That's going to do it from us, though. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Halas, at Usayd, Koshul, at _ Whalen. We are switching to audio plus video as well, so you guys can look at our shining faces, or you can go ahead and listen to our beautiful voices. That, like I said, wraps it up for us. We'll be back next week with 2 really good episodes talking NFL Scouting Combine, what to expect, and then roster moves that the Bears could make in terms of shoring up depth. But bear down. We'll see you guys next week.